Hi, it's Miss Giza King. I'm here with the Day 7 science assignment. Right here, you would click this link and it'll bring you to this article. It's called Evolution Evidence. Why do you have a tailbone? If you look closely at a skeleton, you might notice a triangular bone at the end of a spinal column. This is your tailbone, so right here. Why would you have a tailbone when you don't have a tail? You have a tailbone because your ancient ancestors did have a tail. These sort of leftover structures support the theory of evolution. Structural evolution. Even though two different species may not look similar, they may have similar internal structures that suggest they have a common ancestor. That means both evolved from the same ancestor organism a long time ago. Common ancestry can also be determined by looking at the structure of the organism as it first develops. Vestigial structures. Some of the most interesting kinds of evidence for evolution are body parts that have lost their use through evolution. For example, most birds need their wings to fly, but the wings of an ostrich have lost their original use. Structures that have lost their use through evolution are called vestigial structures. They provide evidence for evolution because they suggest that an organism changed from using the structure to not using the structure or using it for a different purpose. Penguins do not use their wings, known as flippers, to fly in the air. However, they do use them to move in the water. The theory of evolution suggests that penguins evolved to use their wings for a different purpose. A whale's pelvic bones, which were once attached to legs, are also vestigial structures. Whales are descended from land-dwelling ancestors that had legs. Homologous structures are structures that have a common function and suggest common ancestry. For example, homologous structures include the limbs of mammals, such as bats, lions, whales, and humans, which all have a common ancestor. Different mammals may use their limbs for walking, running, swimming, or flying. The method the mammal used to move is considered a common function. So here we have a picture of a mole. It said moles live underground where they do not need eyes to find their way around. This mole's eyes are covered by skin. Body parts that do not serve their original function are vestigial structures. So the same with the fish, the one that we read yesterday. Similar embryos. Some of the oldest evidence of evolution comes from embryology, the study of how organisms developed. An embryo is an animal or plant in its earliest stage of development. This means looking at a plant or animal before it's born or hatched. Centuries ago, people recognized that embryos of many different species have similar appearances. The embryos of some species are even difficult to tell apart. Many of these animals do not differ much in appearance until they develop further. Some unexpected traits can appear in animal embryos. For example, all vertebrate embryos have gill slits, which are not actually gills. They connect the throat to the outside early in development, but eventually close in many species. Only in fish and larval amphibians do they contribute to the development of gills. In mammals, the tissue between the first gill slits forms part of the lower jaw and the bones of the inner ear. The similarities between embryos suggest that these animals are related and have common ancestors. For example, humans did not evolve from chimpanzees, but the similarities between the embryos of both species suggest that they have an ancestor in common with chimpanzees. As our common ancestor evolved, humans and chimpanzees went down different evolutionary paths and developed different traits. Summary. Vestigial structures or structures that have lost their use through evolution are important evidence of evolution. Studying the embryos of organisms also provides evidence that two different animals could have descended from a common ancestor. What is a vestigial structure? Give an example. Okay, so at this point, you need to make a either blank piece of paper and number it, or start numbering it and label the paper Day 7 or Evolution Evidence. You can pause the video to get that ready. You can also make a Google Doc and also title it the same, so then you can just email it to one of your teachers. You can pause now to get that ready. Okay, so what is a vestibular structure, and give an example. So you're going to scroll up to where it talks about vestibular structures, and we know because we have a little subtitle, vestibular structures right here. So what is it? Well, here you have a bold word, and whenever we have a bold word in the reading, that means that generally before or after it, we have a definition. So let's look at the sentence. It's in structures that have lost their use through evolution are called vestibular structures. That sounds like the definition to me, so I would write that down. And what's an example? Well, I would reread or re-look through, or if you have a very good memory, you remembered what it was, some of the structures that some animals have, that it give you an example. Pause now to write your answer for number 1. Number 2, how does embryology provide evidence for evolution? So we're going to go to the subtitle, Similar Embryos. So some of the oldest evolution comes from embryology, the study of how organisms develop. An embryo is an animal or plant at earliest stage. Centuries ago, people recognized that embryos of many different species have similar appearance. The embryos of some species even are difficult to tell apart. Many of these animals do not differ much in appearance until they develop further. So how do embryology provide evidence for evolution? Well, that species look very similar at the early stages of life, and then as they continue to grow, they start developing differences. So they're even hard to tell apart. Pause to write your answer for 2. Number 3, given an example of a structure that is present in human embryos but has disappeared by birth. So we just read this paragraph about what embryology is. So let's look at the next one. Some unexpected traits can appear in animal embryos. For example, all vertebrate, which we are, have gill slits, which are not actually gills. They connect the throat to the outside early in development, but eventually close in many species. Only in fish and larval amphibians do they contribute to the development of gills. Mammals, ding, 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 humans are mammals. The tissue between the first gill slits forms part of the lower jaw and the bones of the inner ear. So, what structure was present in human embryos but has disappeared by birth? Write your answer for 3. Either email this to your teacher in a Google Doc or keep your paper to turn in when we come back and see each other. Thanks, guys.